What is identity? Identity is the answer to one simple question: who am I? Our identity shapes how we see ourselves, how we see others, and how we move through the world. For most of my childhood, I thought I knew the answer. I knew my name, I knew my family, I knew the man I called dad. Then at 12 years old, everything I believed about who I was changed. What is the deal, you guys? It is your girl Asia, and I am back with my second YouTube video, and I feel a level of relief that I've finally gotten to start something that I feel like is going to be very pivotal for the topic that I am going to be talking about today. As you can see in the title, I'm going to be talking about identity and how this huge, I guess, in the Black culture, we would call it like a generational curse. And I'll break that down later in the video so you guys can see how it sort of shook up that foundation for me as far as my identity. And so, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get straight into the video. For a little backstory, my mom, my biological father, and my stepdad all have a parent or two that they don't know. And so, my mom is adopted. Um, for a long time, she didn't know who her biological parents were. My stepdad did not find out about his biological father until he was 35. My biological father lost his um, parents at a really young age. And so, as you can see, the story beginning is already shaky because those three prominent figures in my life already don't have that foundation and the stability in their identity. And so, looking back, I can see how a huge secret at that time was mishandled. I found out at the age of 12 that the man that was raising me was not my biological father. And now that I look back in retrospect, I can see times where I had questioned that. I don't know why I questioned it. I don't know what that was about, but there were times where um I felt an uneasiness. There wasn't a connection that I felt that I should feel. And I know being young, it's hard to explain that at the time, but I really feel like I knew because it's something biological that was missing. And not only that, but there was something in him that was missing, and he was not able to give it to me. And so um, I found out that he wasn't my dad, or my stepdad wasn't my dad. Around 12, I was at a friend's house, and at the time I believe that my mom had shared or had already shared that truth with her girlfriend at the time. And so her girlfriend, I don't know if she spoke about it with another friend or if she sat down with her daughter and told her daughter that, but either way, her daughter found out. And as we're playing Barbies, she just blurts out, like, so and so is not your dad. And so I'm just confused because I'm like, okay, well, what does that mean? Like, what are you talking about? Um, I don't believe that there was a huge shock. I believe that there was a sign of relief because up until that point, my relationship with him was rocky. You know, I felt that he was mean. That was he was stern, he was strict, he was mean. And coming from an army background and then just his whole personal story, um, that's just how he was as a father. That's what he saw, that's what he embodied. And so that's how he was towards um, my sisters and I. And I grew up and I have two sisters that are his biological children from my mom. And so, yeah, that truth was like, what? And at 12 years old, I did not handle it the way that I should have. I mean, who's going to handle it right at 12 years old anyway? But, I don't believe I went initially to my mom and told her. I believe I was at my friend's house and she came and picked me up and took me back home. But I didn't initially tell her anything. I went straight to my sister's. And when I look back, I had this sense of like detachment. There was this final detachment that I had because I was no longer a part of that family unit because I didn't want to be. I didn't want to be his daughter. I didn't want to be a part of him because he, up until that point, was just mean. He's mean, he's stern, he's yelling all the time. Like, I don't want to be a part of anything that he is a part of. And so, even that family unit and finding that out, it was a sign of relief for me. And so when I went to tell my younger sisters, I did it in a way that was kind of like that's not my dad. And I remember feeling like, yeah, and them being younger than me, they didn't understand. They didn't understand it. And so I remember them breaking down and crying, and they're like, "You're lying." And I'm like, "He ain't," just real. I didn't handle it well. I didn't handle it well. They didn't handle it well. We just didn't handle it well. And so, um, it got back to my mom that came out, and it was crazy because maybe a month or two prior to that incident happening, my mom and dad called me into the living room and wanted to talk to me about something. So I'm like, here we go. Your girl's in trouble about something. What I do, didn't wash my dishes, didn't make up my bed. All of these things are going through my mind because it's like, okay, um, I sit down in the living room and they're trying to have this conversation, but they keep laughing. They just keep laughing, like, you know, one's nudging the other, telling the other to go, and the other one's like, "You say something," and it just was weird. It was awkward. It was weird, and I didn't understand it. And so nothing ever came from that. Eventually they were like, "You know what? Never mind. You can leave." So I'm like, "Okay, that was weird." So when that information came out that my stepdad was not my dad, I don't remember a conversation being had with me and my mom. I do believe she confirmed it, but as far as in depth, us going and kind of unpacking that, we didn't initially. It wasn't until a couple of days later where she had admitted, as far as, the day that I wanted to talk to you, that's what I wanted to talk to you about, was letting you know that, so and so was not your biological father, and just running all these things down. And so I don't live in a I don't live in a household at this point that is emotionally mature. I deal with a lot of emotionally immature. My parents at that point, they were young. They didn't have the best foundation growing up, and so they did the best with what they had, and that was nothing. Emotionally, outbursts and anger, and just a lot of highs and lows. A lot of highs and lows, a lot of arguing, um, a lot of expressing our in themselves, and a lot of us expressing ourselves amongst, my siblings, with just anger, anger and just nastiness. And so, man, looking back, I wish that they had taken the time to prepare me for that, because I don't believe they realized how bad off mentally I was already struggling at 12. You know, I had not wanted to be here at 9 years old. I remember, going back when I was older, reading my journals and seeing like, dang, I didn't want to be here. Why? I didn't know about depression. I just knew I didn't want to be here. I know that I struggle with the relationship with my mom. A lot of the memories are kind of faint. And so I can go back to my journal and it kind of jogs my memory a bit. But I don't we just was button heads. I don't know why I remember writing a journal entry stating that she didn't like me. I feel like I'll be better off with my stepdad, which I thought was my dad. you know that it kind of seemed as if maybe there was some type of favoritism, or that's how I felt, it was favoritism, or My sister's kind of antagonizing. I'm being the oldest. I have little sisters, and so maybe going in my room taking something and she taking their word for it. Either way, it just uh I wish I had been better prepared for that, because subconsciously I made up in my mind that I am no longer part of him. And so the level of respect is kind of out the door, especially when I'm already being verbally abused. And so, I'm already just lining stuff up in my head. Um, I did want to add that there were two other times prior to this truth coming out that I questioned my mom as far as him being my dad. And so I remember being little, had to be 7 or 8, and um I'm at my grandma's house and I go in her back room and I see a picture of me. It's a baby picture, and I know it's me because I have the same picture at my house. And so I know this girl is me, but I'm looking at the name and the names don't match. The last names. The first names match, but the last names are a name I've never saw before. So as you can imagine, being a 7 or 8, you're like, well, do I have a twin sister? Like, where's the baby at? Is the baby dead? Did she get adopted? Am I adopted? Like, what's going on here? So that is the very first time, 7 or 8, that I felt like something's off here. Like, who am I? Who is this? What's going on? Another time, there's a family picture that we have, and I wear glasses now, but back then I didn't, for a long time, didn't wear glasses, didn't even know I needed to wear glasses. And so we have a family picture, and in the family picture, my dad, my mom, and my two sisters all have glasses on, and I'm the only one with no glasses. And so as a kid, you feel left out. You're like, I'm looking at this picture, and it's literally in the middle of the hallway, and it's like, what in the world? Why don't I have glasses on? And as a kid, those are the type of stuff that is just like, we pick up on. And so don't think kids aren't picking up on things. Don't think that they're not paying attention to stuff, you know? Um, so I had subconsciously made up in my mind that I was not a part of him anymore. And I can see how the enemy used that to divide, to destroy. And from that point on, I started getting a boldness about myself. And I don't even want to say it's a boldness. I started to become rebellious because the way that I was being treated and the way that I wanted to be treated were two different things. And nobody told me that I shouldn't be treated like that, but I just knew, like, you yelling and screaming is kind of crazy. Our relationship went downhill from there. The relationship was shot from there. You couldn't tell me nothing. Um, it was just a battle day in and day out. And not only were, at the time, I didn't realize they were dealing with mental health issues, I was developing a mental health issue. Um, because it eventually turned into me and my stepdad fighting like grown men off the street. And this went on for years. And so already I don't belong to this man. This guy that is my biological father, we don't know where he's at. My mom has some information about him, but has not kept up with him. And so we don't even know if he's alive at this point. Um, and I was already struggling, feeling different. And now I'm having to navigate the fact that he isn't my dad. I don't know my dad. I don't have any support. Um, I don't have any support. I don't have anybody thinking like, hey, maybe we should get Asia into some counseling, get her into talking to someone, emotionally, just being neglected, being neglected. And I don't believe my parents did it on purpose. I do believe they just didn't know. And I would love to believe that if they could do it again, they would have gotten me the necessary help that I needed at the time. And so who am I? Who am I now that I found out that this guy is not my dad? You know, at this point now we're arguing. I don't know my father. And so I believe that I already feeling neglected in that way was searching for something. And I started looking for it like a lot of young men and a lot of young women do in other people, in love, in what the limerence. I've learned that word, limerence. Um, I'm struggling extremely, with how to show up. Who am I? I'm already um, feeling not worthy because my dad isn't here. Where is he? He needs to come save me. So my mom had hired well, she didn't hire a private investigator. She actually worked with a coworker who did private investigation like on the side. And so she just in a conversation casually brought it up to the coworker, and the coworker was like, "I'm down. I'm gonna get his information and find him." Long story short, they find the man. They find my dad, reaches out to his sister because at the time he was in some type of jail or halfway home or something. He was in something. And so my mom reached out to the sister, sent the letter, and this my aunt then forwarded the message or the letter to my dad. Finding out that they found my dad, I was 17, and I had been through so much from 12, 13 to 17 that the excitement that I thought I would feel didn't exist. It didn't exist. I didn't really care too much to meet the man, but my mom insisted on us linking up or, having a conversation. And so um when I finally did get to talk to him, I was let down again. You know, I did not know at the time that he was dealing with his own mental health issues. And so, now I know that he has more kids and he's has his mental health issues and he's messed up. So what I thought I was missing out on or had missed out on all that time, I end up finding out years later that I didn't really miss out on anything. And so, I remember having a conversation with him, and he said something to the effect of like, if you want to have a relationship with me, then you would have to kind of like initiate that in so many words. It was weird. It was kind of like, well, I'm here. So if you want to have a relationship, reach out type of thing. And I remember thinking like, well, that's not right. I'm the child. Like, you don't want to get to know me. You don't want to put any effort into getting to know who I am. And so that was hurtful. I didn't recognize it as hurtful then. I kind of just brushed it off like, well, hey, at this point, I don't have a dad. So if you here or not, it don't matter. Um, but when I sat back a couple years ago and looked at that, I was like, wow, that was painful, because as parents, it's our job to guide and pursue and to nurture our children. I'm interested in what my sons and my daughter have going on. I want to know them to their core. I want to know them. That is a desire as a parent that I have for my children. And that messed with me for a long time because it's like, man, who am I if he doesn't want to know me? I'm not worthy enough. I'm already struggling with my own stuff and growing up and becoming a teenager and becoming a young woman and living in an environment that's toxic. And there's no real emotional support here. There's just oppression, and people are depressed, and we're anxious, and there's marital issues, because my parents eventually end up having marital issues. And so it was a lot. It was a lot. I don't believe people understand how important it is to know who you are. But as I gotten older and I've walked this Christian walk, it's not necessarily who you are, but whose you are. And I say that because I'm a child of God now. So I have a new identity that I'm able to put on, and He is able to fill the void for me that my fathers and my mother could not fill. And so as I walk this walk, I realized that they were never going to be able to fill the void. And my relationship with the Lord will do that. And I know you say, oh, that's so cliche. Listen, I am speaking from experience that it does have its days where I question the Lord, like, well, you got me here and I don't have a dad. Like that, I'm a statistic. I believe I cried for the first time in like 3 years. 3 years ago, I was driving down the street and I thought about my biological father and I cried. Up until that point, I had to be hard. I had a calloused heart. I was hardened, because my stepdad and I started having a real um, crazy relationship. Crazy relationship. And so I had to be my protector. I got to be the man. I have to come off a little bit more masculine in order for me not to get walked on and stepped all over. Um, and so it messed me up. It messed me up in relationships because I was not feminine. Feminine is weak. I don't want to be weak. I don't want to be hurt. I don't want to be abandoned. And so men don't look like they get abandoned and hurt. And they're not weak. They're strong. They don't have feelings. They're not crying. I was super sensitive. You couldn't even look at me when I was younger. And that was another thing that I struggled with too. Because of the sensitivity and because of my um, because of my because of how sensitive I was, I felt like it made me a target. And so yeah, um, I have performed a lot. I've put on a lot of masks. I have shied away from fully stepping into the person that God has called me to be because I was still being held back by that bondage of the lack of identity and not knowing who I belong to and not feeling loved and not feeling wanted. Um, and so I struggled a lot with latching on to other people's ideas and beliefs, and they were never fully my own. I didn't have a sense of self. And so now that I'm 35 and I'm married and I have children, I am finding my sense of self. I am finding my groove. I'm finding how I like to wear my hair and my little specs and my jewelry. I'm finding those things. But more importantly, I am grounding myself in this truth is that I was made in the image of Jesus Christ. He is my heavenly Father. He knew me before I was formed in my mother's womb. And so, if that's all that I can take away from that, and if that's all that I need in order to be whole, then I have to start putting on this new identity and walking in that. And yes, times get hard. I am human. There are questions that I have that are not answered. I don't speak to my biological father. I don't know anything about that side of the family. I'm big on tradition now. I want to know what the traditions are. I want to know our culture. My mom had got me an ancestry DNA kit, and that was her way of just like, your sisters know their dad, and I know you don't know your dad, and so I hope that this brings some type of closure, some type of comfort. And so I was able to take the test, and you get to see, it breaks it down to the, what is the word? Countries, I guess, that the DNA belongs to. And when I got it, I was excited a little bit because I felt that maybe it would bring me a sense of peace knowing that I belong to this culture. This My DNA is shared with these people. Um but when I got it and I did the test and I got the results back, I'm not going to lie, it confused me even more. Cuz it's like, okay, well, I know this new information, but who are these people? How do I fit in this narrative? How do I fit in this story? And so I've been dealing with that back and forth. And again, the Lord just reinforced the fact that it matters, but not as much as me and you matter. It matters, but not as much as you getting to know your Father in heaven. It's not going to take away, and it's not going to take away from the fact that this is the truth and that you don't know your earthly father, but it should bring comfort in knowing that I've stamped you and I have proved you. I've put my stamp of approval on you, your minds, and who can separate me from the Lord? And so, well, I don't have it all figured out. Like I said, there's times where I struggle with just showing up and being myself and being comfortable in who I am today as a mother, as a wife, as a sister, as a daughter, you know. But me filming and me being able to talk about these things help me. It helps me be able to process all of this. It helps me to be able to make sense of it because for a long time it didn't make sense and I didn't have the language to use. I didn't have the verbiage to use to express that this hurts. And so there's more to the story. I guess I'll do, like a second part, but that is sort of an introduction into this experience that we call life and how messed up it can be at times. Um, because it can be messed up at times. You just wonder, like, what in the world? How? Why? And something. I mean, I had a stepdad, but it's just like you would think that it would. You would have thought it would have helped, but it just caused a lot more harm. If I could leave you guys with a message, the message would be that you matter. Your likes, your dislikes, your personality, your character, your beliefs, all of those things matter. And if nobody's ever told you it matters, it does. My message would be to dig deep. Who cares? Who it upsets? Who it offends? Um, that getting that sense of self helps us to navigate this life. It's already hard. It already has its own trials. It already has its own bumps in the road. And to not know yourself in this life is dangerous, extremely dangerous. And so I would encourage you guys to seek the Lord if that's what you want to do. Seek your heritage, your DNA, whatever that looks like for you, and you feel like it is going to bring you a little step closer to clarity, then I encourage you guys to do that. Um, because identity absolutely does matter. And it matters in the way that you show up in this life and the relationships that we are called to build. Um, and so, yeah, uh, my name is Asia, and yeah, that's it.